Carolyn, it's wonderful to see you. I'm excited to talk with you about your new trip that you're leading for GeoEx. And I have to ask, the last time I saw you, we were conversing in San Francisco on stage. You were living in Yemen and you were writing about Ibn Battuta. You were researching his travels. And now you're no longer in Yemen and you're passionately involved in studying Scotland. And I'm wondering how did that all happen?
Well, it all started in Yemen, where I met my husband, and then I ended up moving to Washington. So that's part one. Mm-hmm. I took him to Scotland on a holiday in 2019, and you know, he's somebody who's interested in history, and he kept asking me things about Scotland, which, you know, is fair. And I realized after a bit that I was sort of making things up because I really didn't know, and so. So that was a little bit embarrassing because I realized that actually I didn't really know much about my own history. So on the way home, some friends that we were traveling with gave me this magazine to take back with me, and I think it was the Scott magazine or Scottish Field or something very Scottish. And on one of the pages there was an advertisement for getting a degree in Scottish history, which seemed to be sort of providential. So I applied, and they took me, and so here we are, a little bit further on, and Yemen has not been abandoned exactly, but yes, I have definitely gone back to my roots. Actually, there are many similarities between Yemen and Scotland.
Really?
They're both kind of clan societies, you know. There's a lot of similarities.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It's quite like being home in many ways.
Wow. Well, so what has, I mean, that sort of segues to what I was going to ask you. What's most surprised you studying your homeland? What has most surprised you in your studies?
That most of what we learned wasn't true.
Wow. Right.
You know, when I was at school, we were taught essentially British history. So it was, you know, Britain, which is to say a lot of that is English. But the other thing is that, you know, that was already many moons ago. And I realize now that what we were being taught was very much from a perspective. And now that's not quite the same perspective. Now I would say Scotland is a much more confident country. It's kind of losing its Britishness. Quite aside from, you know, the whole independence movement and everything, just aside from that, I think there is a newfound confidence in its culture, in its arts, in its history, and its own sort of identity. And so I think that now the history is being told from many different points of view. We've got a lot more female historians. We've got a lot more sources, you know, archaeological sources, because in Scotland we don't have a lot of paper sources. Either it was destroyed, climate, you know, lots of reasons. Edward I, you know, lots of raids. A lot of our records have gone, and actually we were not a centralized government for a very long time, so we didn't have the same record keeping as, for example, the English, for example. So for lots of reasons, our history now is much broader. There's a lot of different disciplines that come in, which gives you a completely different idea about it. So that's been a surprise. That's
fabulous. I mean, that's you. I'm thinking you must feel a new connection, sort of a deeper connection to your homeland through all these studies.
I kind of do. I think my husband's a bit worried. Mind you, he did like it. There were two particular places that we went to he really liked, and he kept saying, "Oh, maybe I could live here." But then the thing is, it was gorgeous weather and it was sunny and all of these things, you know. And I said, maybe if you were here all the time, you mightn't think this, because he doesn't like the cold very much. So anyway, but yes, no, it has definitely had this kind of follow-on effect, I'd say. Definitely.
That's fantastic. And just listening to you makes me really want to go on this Scotland trip with you. It's so exciting. Can you tell me about about the Scotland trip and what excites you about the itinerary, and just kind of your thoughts on the itinerary as a whole?
Actually a really great trip, I think. And I did say that to Sarah when we were talking. It's one of the things that's great about it is that it covers an area that a lot of tourists wouldn't go to. You know, tourists tend to come, they'll go to Edinburgh, of course, it's the big magnet, and then they'll go to the Highlands. And on this trip, with the exception possibly of the Trossachs and Loch Lomond, there's not really a whole area that people would go to. So, and it covers so much. It covers, you know, there's nature, there's this scenery, there's art, so I think the trip is really, really very diverse, very well put together. I'm definitely quite excited about it. There's parts about it. I mean, I haven't been to this amazing art park. I've just been reading about it, Jupiter Art. So I have to go in a little bit earlier and zoom around some of this myself, because this is new since you know, I mean, not since I was last there, but certainly in the parts that I've been visiting. A lot of it's new.
Right. No, it's fantastic.
It's a very big trip.
You'll be able to sort of your newfound knowledge about your country, which is different from what you gained growing up, and just your passion for revisiting your homeland. I mean, I think that's going to be really fun for you, and sharing it with people, with travelers, will be fun, I think.
Right. No, and actually the other thing about this area is that despite the fact that it's not on the tourist path, a lot of it is really inimical to Scotland's history. It's really the roots of Scotland's history. It's also the areas where, you know, all the troublemakers lived, so which seems fairly apt, you know. But there's, you know, there's the Galloway, which is, you know, was one of the last areas to actually be part of Scotland. The whole southern Argyll area is the area that was settled by the Irish, so that's the Irish roots of Scotland. It's also the area of the Norse. And we're learning more and more about, you know, how we were so influenced by them in ways that we have kind of forgotten. Great seafood, by the way, great seafood. Whiskey, of course. Nature, great castles. I mean, what's not to like? It's sort of Scotland in miniature, but in the area that most people don't go to.
Wow, that's wonderful. That just sounds fantastic. I'm ready to sign up right now.
You should.
Is there one particular experience or place that you're especially excited about?
Let's see. Well, I mean, I am interested that we're going to Kirkcudbright, because it's a tiny little town. It's kind of, you know, in an area that not many people would go to. I mean, I would be surprised if many Scots have even been there, by the way. Wow. I mean, really, it's just not really on the beaten path. But it's an area that a lot of painters went to, artists. In the late 19th century, there was an art movement called the Glasgow Boys, and some of them went down there, and one of them stayed there. And this has kind of imbued this town very much with this artistic, cultural side that I would say is much bigger than the size of it, you know. So I think that that's really nice, and that's going to be interesting. And then we're going to a Neolithic park of standing stones in Western Argyll, which is the biggest in Scotland, but it's not terribly well known. The ones in Orkney and the ones in Lewis are much more known, but this one's more spread out, and there's lots of different things. So I think, that's really interesting. And of course, it ends in Western Perthshire, Highland Perthshire, which is really kind of my sort of area. So that's nice. Yeah, no, it covers a lot of ground. But it's also, for such a small country, it's just one little corner of it, but it still covers so much in terms of historical periods and scenery. So yeah, it's a great little trip.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Carolyn. It sounds super exciting, and if I can get the free time, I'll see you in Scotland.
Well, you can come on that one, and I will join you on your Mexico trip. How about that?
Perfect. It's a deal.